All right, welcome to Words of the Wise. Today's guest is Steve Click from Ohio Department of Public Safety. He has over 40 years in the law enforcement space, and for the last 9 years has dedicated his life to first responder wellness. His resume is really impressive, and I'm actually going to let him hop in and talk to you about that because it is so long and so impressive, and I want him to be the one to kind of give that background. But welcome to the show, Steve Click. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to have you on as a wellness expert.
Thank you, Paige. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciated following along with your posts and everything else. I think they're all right on point. I think folks identify with them and they connect with them, and I'm really uh, thankful and excited about being able to join you today. So again, as you said, I've got a number of years of experience with the Ohio State Highway Patrol, but the really cool part of my job was since 2016, where I've been able to work full time in the wellness space. I was commander of cadet training for the Ohio State Highway Patrol at the time. We train our own officers as well as officers from the agency. I got pulled out by the superintendent at that time, and basically he says, "This is what we're going to do. We're going to come up with a program. We're going to take care of our people. Something that we thought we had done well, but we needed to do better. We're going to take care of folks, and this is what you're going to do." I kind of went home that evening and told my wife that Friday's my last day in the academy, and she says, "Could you have said no?" And I said, "Have you met him?" I mean, it was never would you like to. It's you're going to do this. And I just saw him this past Friday, and every time I get a chance to see him, he's retired from football now, but I thank him for this opportunity to put me on this path to work with some of the most amazing people, not just from Ohio, but from all over the country. Being able to, whether they're mental health clinicians, whether they're first responder peer support folks, just individuals that work in that space, whether they've been first responders or the families of. So it's just been a very affirming position. Folks tease me all the time about my calendar, and they say, "You're retired, right?" I say, "This isn't work, right?" I don't really look at it as work because I get a chance to do some really amazing things with some really amazing people. And I've had a chance to learn so much. 2 weeks ago, I was just out in your state, California, for the International Association of Chiefs of Police Officer Safety and Wellness Conference. So I got, again, connect with folks that I've known from other conferences I've met online, and just hear some really great concepts and ideas about what's going on in wellness across the country, but specifically excited about what we're doing in Ohio. We have the support of our governor's office, Director of Public Safety, Andy Wilson, my boss, Kristen Slaper. We've got, when you have the boss's support and their encouragement, it means a ton as far as you being able to go out and do with the things you want to do.
100%. And how rewarding is it to do what you love and something that means something to you? And I'm like shaking my head because I can relate to that very deeply of like,
Sure.
yes, it's work, but it's not work. It's
Right.
like serving this deeper purpose that's so rewarding. And coincidentally enough, when we're recording this, depending on when someone's listening to this, but as we're recording this, this is First Responder Wellness Week. And so it's
Yes.
kind of perfect timing for us to have this conversation about first responder wellness. And with you, I would love to, dive into really the tactical points of, what are some resources and training methods and things that can be implemented because you do have so much experience in this space. But before we dive into all like nuts and bolts of things, I would really love to understand why this is something that's, you're so passionate about. And I think that, I talk about this a lot. I think that it's important for us to have a why and a deeper reason. And
I
that's the
agree.
thing that keeps you going. And so for you, what is your why? Was there a specific event that happened that really pushed you in this wellness space or accumulation of events, or is there some deeper meaning that kind of keeps you going?
I didn't think so. But in working with some of the mental health folks that I work with, and when we discuss some of the events that I was involved in during the course of my career, and I never say these are things that happened to me. I say these are situations I was involved in because I was there voluntarily. I chose to do this line of work knowing it. But 11 days out of the training academy, I handled my first fatal traffic crash. And it was a beautiful Sunday morning. 17-year-old boy was killed. 16-year-old boy was driving the vehicle at the time. It wasn't reckless. It wasn't, intoxication. It was just, he lost control of the vehicle, rolled it over. Neither boy was wearing seatbelts. And I remember the families rolling up on the scene because they'd all been at breakfast together and seeing the reaction of the parents and hearing all that. But here I'm 21 years old. I'm 11 days out of the training academy. And through no fault of the patrols, through no fault of anybody's back in 1985, there was nothing for us. I mean, it's just do your crash report, do your field sketch, take your pictures, file your charges, and then, you got to be ready to do something the very next day. And through the course of my career, now as I look back, again, knowing what I know and getting a chance to work with some of the folks, so give you an example, giving death notifications. One of the things they say that's extremely difficult and affects law enforcement officers more than the other first responders, but it affects everybody, is doing death notifications. And when I was told that, I got to thinking that, I was a sergeant at several different facilities that had a lot of crashes. So we handled a lot of fatals, and I made a lot of those notifications to parents, to spouses, to folks. But then I went right back to work, and I never thought about it. It never dawned on us. But over the time, we see the accumulation. Some people equate it to the backpack with rocks. I use bears and ducks. That if you're taken out by a bear, it's loud, bloody, exciting, violent, one-shot deal, hopefully. If you're taken out by ducks, it takes place over a really long period of time. They both took you out. One just did it really loud, bloody, and exciting. One did it over the course of 10, 15, 20, 30 years. So I would have to say that, seeing how that affected folks. And then I wasn't involved in this situation, but someone very close to me was. He was the gentleman who had been my coach when I first came on the patrol. And he had made a traffic stop. And as the guy was driving away, he was not happy about getting a ticket. And he and Bill had kind of exchanged words. But there was a little girl in the back seat, and she's waving to Bill because that's what you do. You wave to the police officer. He waved. Bill had children about that age. He smiles and waves back. And the family went down the road, and they were struck by a dump truck, and it killed everybody in the car. And Bill's the first one on the scene, and the little girl was killed. And you would try to talk to Bill about that. And no matter how good of friends we were, I would immediately get shut down. Not talking about that, change the subject. I've told you before. And I know he carried that through his retirement and up until he passed away several years ago. That never left him. One of the things that I know that happens to a lot of first responders is someone will come up and they'll say, "What's the worst call you ever on? What's the worst thing you've ever seen?" Well, I can remember it. I put it in a box and I locked it. The fact that you're asking me to open up the box, I'm going to share it with you, but I'm going to share everything with you, the trauma and everything, because I put it away. I don't want to relive it every day. So when I had the opportunity in 2016, and again, I got involved in peer support back in 2002 just because I wanted to support the folks that I work with. But when I got a chance to be part of the patrol creating their members assistance team, which we did in 2002, and we had officers and dispatchers and civilians trained across the state of Ohio, that when things went sideways, we could send somebody in that had some training, some ability to come in and say, "Hey, look, this is normal. You're having your normal reaction. You're not crazy. You're not weak. You're not anything else. You're a person." And we get it. And again, having the support of the superintendent back then, the patrol and the division itself. And it didn't happen overnight. I mean, we're a culture that moves, not very quickly. But over time, you started to get those phone calls. It's like, "Hey, can you come talk to so-and-so?" Or, "Hey, do you have somebody that can?" And it wasn't always work. Sometimes, we forget that as first responders, we do 8 at work, but we've got 16 at home every day, and hopefully. Things can happen there. And I was getting phone calls from post commanders and from sergeants and from other troopers and dispatchers and says, "Hey, I'm worried about so-and-so. Could you come talk to this person about that?" So it really kind of builds upon itself. The Highway Patrol now has a wellness unit, a lieutenant, a sergeant, a trooper with a therapy canine, a clinician that works in it. I mean, this is unheard of. This is great. And the organization strongly supports it, and that makes a big difference. In the last 9 years of doing this, I've seen the change in Ohio. I got police chiefs that are all on board, fire chiefs that are all on board, sheriffs that are like, "Hey, this is great. When can you come talk to my agency?" Whereas when I first came on, you rub dirt on it. Even worse, go home and have a drink. I mean, that's what we said in 1985 is go home and have a drink. And I knew there had to be a better way. I'm also the son of a state trooper. My dad did 33 years with the department before he retired. So kind of gives me an inside perspective on the family side. My dad was at the riots in the 1960s. He was at all the different, prison riots and college riots and stuff like that, and never spoke about any of that. Didn't talk to my mom, didn't talk to us, and I know he didn't talk to anybody else. But I know all those things are still, he's still with us, thank goodness. But at 82, I know all that stuff's still floating around in there.
Right.
So given this opportunity by the superintendent back in 2016 has just been really wonderful for me.
I love I love the analogy of the bear and the ducks. I've never heard that before. And of course, we've heard like the rucksack, the backpack,
Yeah,
the cup overflowing, things of that nature. But I do love me a good analogy. And I definitely like pictured that when you were saying the bears and the ducks. But I also deeply related to when you said that thing that was really hard, I just locked it away in a box and I like put it away because I think that that's human nature when you don't know how to process things and deal with things, or maybe you don't have the resources available to you. That's what we do. And that's what I did with all my childhood traumas. I just shoved it down as far as I could, locked it up, and threw away the key. And no one wants to revisit those things. You store it away for a reason. You
right.
shove it down for a reason because it's painful, it's hard. You don't want to relive that or to, have to process this really hard thing. But I also think that we know now what happens when you don't process those things. And it never really goes away, like you said. Like that there's still that thing, that undealt with trauma or experience that you went through if you don't process it. And in my case, like I my whole life exploded at one point, and I was like, okay, well now I have to deal with it.
Right.
And I think a lot of people can relate to that, where it's like, you're you get one too many ducks or
Absolutely.
your
Absolutely.
cup starts to overflow or whatever it is, and then you're kind of forced to have to deal with it. I want to talk about a couple things that you said. One is getting buy-in and support from leadership.
Right.
And this is a conversation that we have a lot because there's kind of a mixed bag of opinions on this, of like, does it come from the top? Is it a mutual partnership? How important do you think it is that leadership is supportive of this and, really advocating for these wellness programs? Do you think that that's essential for
It's
the
vital.
success? Okay.
Oh, it's absolutely vital. So we've had a couple of real champions here in the state of Ohio. We had a department on the west side of the state of Ohio, one of the first that I know of that instituted mandatory wellness checks. And a lot of agencies have now adopted that, but he was the first one to go every year, and he marked on the radio so everybody knew that the boss is out at his wellness check. And you did it on company time. Now, and here's the thing, Paige, I could come in and I could talk to you about football. I could talk to you about the weather, or I could talk to you about what was going on in my world. And nothing came back to my agency other than Steve was scheduled to be here and he showed up.
Yep.
I can come in and just stare at you. I mean, we don't even have to talk and you can provide me some resources. But again, nothing comes back to the agency. Steve was supposed to be there and he was there. So having the boss, so I ran into this a couple of times when I was still on the patrol where I'd be talking to a mid upper level commander and I'm like, well, we'll do this. And they're like, well, I don't really think we need to get into that. I'm like, not a problem. I'll let the colonel know that you weren't interested. Now wait a minute. Hang on a second. I didn't say that. And I had his permission. In fact, I had his blessing to use him in that way. If I was getting some pushback, say, not a problem. I'll let the colonel know that you weren't. And no one really wanted to be that guy. So having these again, police chiefs, fire chiefs, sheriffs, all those folks around the state of Ohio that embrace it and say, look, I had issues and I got help, and look at me, I'm the boss now. I think that that's been huge, and how the boss goes very often is how the agency will go. You have a toxic boss, you got a toxic agency.
Mhm.
And I think that so many times we've seen across the country when things go sideways for an agency, if you start looking at their culture and everything, you realize that a lot of these things don't happen in a vacuum. And when something bad happens, a lot of times people will go, yeah, it was just a matter of time. Well, wait a minute. If you knew it was a matter of time, why didn't you do something? Well, the bosses didn't want to mess with it. They didn't want to, deal with it. So like, Okay, well, now guess what you get to deal with? Just like you just said, I can store it away, and now all of a sudden it comes out. Now I'm dealing with the new thing and the old things. So I think it
Yeah.
is incredibly important for the leadership, both the uniform leadership, the first responders, and the civilian leadership, city council, county commissioners, the mayor's office, the director's office, that to have those civilians go, I need good first responders. I need them healthy. We have a first responder staff crisis in the United States, not just Ohio, in the United
Mhm.
States, just like we do mental health. If we're not taking care of the folks that are still out doing it, who's taking care of our communities? Who's taking care of our families? Because we've lost a lot of people, not just LE, but we've lost police, we've lost dispatchers at an alarming rate. Who's going to take those calls? Who's going to dispatch I mean, if we don't take care of those folks and encourage the next generation to say, well, we're going to take care of you because they see what we've done in the past, that's a huge recruitment point. If an agency's not taking care of who's there now, why do I want to go work there? I'll go
Right.
work somewhere else, or I'll go load trucks, or whatever like that. So having that buy-in from the top and having the boss say, you know what, I'm in. I did a speech at the Ohio Air Guard Base, Air National Guard Base, a couple of years ago. And they said, look, the colonel's going to introduce you, and then he's busy, he's going to leave. I said, no problem. Colonel, after he had made a very nice introduction, came down, sit down in the front row, and opened up his portfolio and got out a pen. He knew what was going on behind him, but I could see it. Everybody's like pointing in their elbow. Colonel didn't leave. Colonel didn't leave. He was setting the tone that I'm taking time out of my day, and you all know how busy I am, but this is important to me as the commander of this installation.
Yeah.
It is certainly important to you. He set a tone. I don't know if he took a note. I don't know, what, but he allocated the time to say to his personnel, this is important to me. And I think that folks were paying more attention. There was more buy-in because the boss chose to hang with us.
I think it's an excellent point that you said, talking about recruitment, of course, because you want to have an agency that takes care of people, and I do think that that's a recruitment benefit, to your agency. But what you said to me that stuck out was the retention part of it. Like, how
Yeah.
can you keep the people who are there
Mhm.
healthier and there without them lateraling or just leaving the profession altogether? And the one thing about leadership that you said, because it's one thing for leadership to say, I support this,
Mhm.
go for it. It's another thing for leadership to be doing it. And that's
Absolutely.
exactly what you said is like, yes, like it's so important for them to support it, but it's also very important for them to actually participate in the things that they're saying that they're supporting. And I think that's what creates that culture of wellness and where people feel safe, because if chief can do it, or if commander can do it, or whoever is in leadership, if they can do it, then I can do it. And it's not like, oh, well, they say they care, but then when we do our mandatory wellness checks, they're nowhere to be found.
Right. Exactly. Yeah,
And I also
exactly.
think it's so funny because you say mandatory and everyone like has like this like visceral reaction where they're like, ah, like that word mandatory, I think everyone kind of like shies away from. But I have heard really good success stories from a lot of agencies across the country that have done the same thing, and they get really good participation. And they've had really great success with that mandated annual check.
Well, here's the advantage of mandatory. If I really do want to go talk to somebody, but I don't want to go ask my boss, I don't want to go ask my sergeant, everybody goes.
Everyone's doing
I
it.
can come
Yep.
out in the garage and I can tell you this was garbage. I went and talked about football, or I just stared. No one has any idea that I did it. And I have some pushback occasionally. Well, we can't make them do it. Okay. Police officers, do you make them qualify with their weapon? Well, of course we do. Okay, if you can make them qualify with their weapon, you can make them get their continuing professional training, updates on constitutional law. If you can make them do all that, same thing in the fire service. Everybody's got continuing professional, if I can make them do that, I make them wear a certain uniform. I make them look a certain way. I make them carry a certain weapon, drive a certain vehicle. If I have all of that ability, you have it. You just don't want to exercise it.
Yeah.
You know, and,
Yeah.
I like the line, and I used the line, and I thought it was great. Gene Hackman, who just, of course, recently passed away, Denzel Washington, Crimson Tide. He says, "We're here to preserve democracy, not practice it." And that's what I tell chiefs all the time. You're the boss. If you want to work at this department, this is what you're going to do. This is a condition of what you're welcome to go work for some, other entity. But if you're going to be here, we're going to have a healthy force. You're going to be physically healthy. You're going to be mentally healthy. You're going to wear my uniform. You're going to look the way I want you to. I don't see the difference. So when I kind of confront chiefs with that, sometimes I don't get an answer back. And again, if it's mandatory, we all do it. Nobody thinks of it.
Well, I think the thing that's interesting too is like a lot of the training is for safety. You want to make sure that like every year you're doing your training so that you're safe. You can do your hands-on, you can do your shooting practice, all the things that are going to keep you safe and current out there, and considering wellness as a piece of safety. Because we
Absolutely.
know that like if you are not mentally well, you can't make effective decisions. You can't,
Yeah.
have the wherewithal that, on the streets that you need to have that level of safety that's required of your profession. So I think considering wellness as a piece of safety
Very
training
much.
is a good way to think about it. So I want to get into like the little like nuts and bolts because you are such an expert. Mental health. We talked about the cumulative trauma
Mhm.
and the things that first responders see daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, and how those things add up. And if you don't have the resources to offload them, then that can manifest in negative ways. Um, what are some of, I know you teach mental health and you have
Mhm.
some training methods that you introduce into your training. What are some of the most effective training methods that you teach or that you've seen for mental health?
Basically, one of the things that I think that works the best is to normalize people's reactions. Very often, first responders think that I'm the only one that's acting, reacting this way. I'm the only one that feels this way. I'm the only one drinking more than I did. I'm the only one fighting with my spouse. I'm the only one not getting along with my kids or not sleeping. And I think once we start to demystify that and say, no, that's not true. Give me a computer in 20 minutes and I'll find, two other first responders in two other states that are going to tell me almost the same story. You're not as unique as you think you are. I think that's one of the biggest things that's helped. We do a series of seminars called post critical incident seminars here in Ohio. They're in like 11 states. But the big key is you sit in a room, you sit in a square, and you hear other people tell their stories about what they went through and how it's affecting them and their families today. And I tell them on the first day, somebody across the room is going to hear your story and they're going to go, oh my God, how did they know? Because you're telling their story, different location, different department, but you're telling their story. And I think one of the most effective tools that we've had is destigmatizing. And I hate that word because it gets beat up, but destigmatizing, getting help. So if I jack up my knee and I'm chasing a bad guy and I hurt my knee and I got to go to the doctor, nobody thinks anything about it. Hey, I hope you feel better. If I need help here, if I just need help with who I am, and I go to see a doctor, why should that be any different than going to see the eye doctor, going to see the dentist, having a mechanic work on your car because it makes a funny noise? It doesn't make me any less of a man. It doesn't make me any less of an office firefighter, medic, a dispatch. It doesn't make me any less of those things. That's not my area of expertise. So I think one of the most effective tools that we've had is getting connections to mental health. So that way, mental health knows how to react to us because we're a very unique, I'll be nice, a very unique culture. I mean, we run into burning buildings, we chase after people with guns, we stop people in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere. Those aren't normal things to do. But the mental health folks have to know how to react to us. We have to know that they're there for us. They're not going to criticize, they're not going to question, they're not going to, anything else. They're truly there to help us deal with whatever we dealt with so that we can go back and do it again. They're not going to try to take us off the street. They're not going to try to medicate us. They're going to try to help us, deal with those things so that way that backpack doesn't overfill or I don't get too many ducks. Yeah, I had some ducks. I got rid of them. I've got room for more ducks.
Yeah,
And I think that's important
I love that. So normalizing,
very much.
talking about it, actually having conversations
Getting it
about
out.
it,
Yes, ma'am.
and creating that community is what I heard. It's like the more you can normalize it, the more you can talk about it, then the more you feel like you have a community of other people who are experiencing similar things. So you no longer feel like you're alone on an island
Huge.
isolating. I also love that you talked about treating physical and mental injuries
Mhm.
the same. And I've had this conversation before, and I think that it's such a good perspective because it's true. It's like if you're out on the streets and you pull a hamstring, you got to go see the doctor. You got to get treated for that. You got to figure out like, can you go back out tomorrow? Are you good? Or
Right.
like, do we need to take a couple days? And it's the same, or I mean, I believe it should be the same for mental injuries. Did you see a child death? Was that an injury like that? Are you good? Or do we need to treat that by talking about it, or do you need a couple days off before you go back? And like you said, making that feel so normal that
Mhm.
it's not like I'm weak or I'm not tough, because I need to deal with it. Treating mental and physical injuries in a similar fashion, I think is a really, really good perspective. And I laughed when you were talking about how first responders aren't like quote unquote normal.
Right.
Because I say this all the time, like there are so many easier groups that I could be teaching this wellness stuff to. But first responder community is the best, the absolute best, like true superheroes, like in my mind, like
Loyal to the fault.
what you guys do is extraordinary. And so, I think that you can agree that being in this wellness space and making sure that we keep, the first responder community as healthy as possible is like the most rewarding. But yeah, it's a fun group of individuals to work with on a day to
You
day.
could, if you had a mechanical issue and you called one of the departments that you work with and say, "Hi, I'm Paige, and my car's broke down," they'd be like, "Great, man. We'll have a record come out." The departments that you've done all this amazing work with, you can call and say, "Hey, it's Paige, and I don't know what's the matter with." And they go, "We got two cars on the way," because they've made that connection, and because you were there for them, they're going to be absolutely there for you. That's why we came up with the clinician safety course here in Ohio. We ask so much of our clinical partners, but they don't think like we do. So we wanted to provide them something. Hey, you're helping us out. Let's let you have some of our perspective so that you can do that safely and stuff like that. So yeah, first responders are loyal to it. You get on the A list and it's number hard. It's hard to get off the list, but once you're on there, you're in tight. I equate it to the whole Godfather thing. Friend of ours, friend of ours. Once you're a friend of ours, now you're in.
Yeah.
And we've had situations where mental health clinicians have shown up at scenes and been treated like you are part of the responding unit because they know what they're there for and they're only there to help them and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's extremely important.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the same topic of mental wellness, I want to talk about a topic that is really prevalent right now, especially that there's been a lot of news lately of a number of suicides that have happened within the last few weeks. And we know that suicide is still something that's an issue and a challenge. We also know that wellness has come such a long way, especially since like you started when you said there was nothing. And now I think that agencies really are taking a stance and doing, what they can to prevent and to educate and to have resources. What do you think is missing, or what are some things that you've taught for suicide prevention awareness that might be helpful that agencies can implement to reduce the risk and reduce the number of suicides that we're still seeing today?
Yeah, and I the sad number is according to the folks that compile these statistics, we lose 40 to 45%, or I'm sorry, we lose 2 to 3 times the number of first responders every year to suicide that we do the line of duty. And that number is at a 40 to 45% reporting rate. So that number is way, way worse than what we truly know it is. It gets blamed on accidental and it gets blamed on, undetermined and stuff like because we don't want to stigmatize the family. We don't want to stigmatize the first responder. We've had a couple of situations here in Ohio specifically where we've lost a first responder to suicide, and the families come out and said it was suicide. We're not going to beat around the bush. We're not going to die unexpectedly. No, they took their own life, and let's talk about that because
Mhm.
for so many years we didn't say the S word. for so many years, we don't talk about that. Well, talking about it clearly didn't help. It didn't make it go away. In fact, if anything, we see that we lose first responders for a variety of reasons. And I'm sure that you've seen the news where there's an agency that in the course of the last couple of weeks between active duty and full time, they've lost four.
Or, yeah.
That's horrific. I mean, any of them are horrific. I mean, our job is dangerous enough. Like I said, we go in burning buildings, we chase people with guns. We don't need to help the bad guys by doing that. I think one of the other problems that we have, though, Paige, is if I'm worried about my friend Paige, I'm afraid that if I go and I approach her, I'm going to make her mad. She's going to be upset with me. She's going to be angry. And we know from talking to individuals who have either attempted or there was an intervention, Paige is not going to be mad. She's going to be glad that somebody actually noticed and asked the question. And I got to ask the question in the right way, because if I come up and say, come on, Paige, that's stupid. You're not going to do anything stupid. You're not going to open up to me. But if I say, look, I'm concerned about you because of these things, are you thinking about killing yourself? That could possibly start that conversation. And now I can get you to that help. Here in the state of Ohio, the Ohio Suicide Prevention Foundation, which is the lead for suicide prevention, has identified first responders as an at-risk group. I'm part of their stakeholder group. I'm part of the International Association of Chiefs of Police, Law Enforcement Suicide Prevention Consortium, where we just met here last week or 2 weeks ago in Anaheim when we were there for the conference. We'll meet again in June, and that's our focus is training and preventing suicides. There's a number of different good programs out there. A good mental wellness program at your department that is encouraged, and I'm not going to lose my gun, and I'm not going to get taken off the street or get pulled off a truck if I'm a firefighter or whatever. If I can come in and say, I need help, it's a little like what we saw years ago with alcohol. And we might still see it not a lot as much, but I can come to my boss in 2025 and say, I have an alcohol problem, but I'm going to my meetings. I've got my chip. I'm working the steps. I'm doing what I need to do. And the boss is like, okay, what if I come to the boss and I say I've had suicidal ideation? Understandably, they're not going to want me to go out on the road with their gun in a car and stuff like that. It doesn't mean I'm going to take my own life. It means I'm struggling right now. And maybe I need some help in that area. I need to know that if I go get help, you're not going to take my gun. You're not going to pull me off a truck. The whole agency's not going to know, hey, watch out for Steve, because
Right.
Those are some of the things that we need to do to help our people to feel comfortable asking for help. I'll let you help me subdue a prisoner. I'll let you help me carry boxes. I'll let you do all that. I gotta let you help me when I'm struggling with those things too.
And you reference this as an acronym, and I think it's really, I always laugh about this because you guys love your acronyms, and I try to keep up with all the acronyms, but you said this as QPR.
Question, persuade, and refer. So if I'm worried about someone, a coworker, if I'm worried about one of my supervisors or a subordinate or whoever I know, I need to ask the question first. There's ways to ask the question. There's ways not to ask the question. There's ways that if I ask it, I'm going to shut you down. But there's ways that I can ask you the question. Once I've asked you the question, I need to be prepared for that answer. So if I say to you, are you thinking about killing yourself? And you go, yeah, I have been. I need to be able to just immediately shift gears in to persuade. Now I've got to persuade you to get help, right? We've at least established that. That's the biggest hurdle. We're over the biggest hurdle. The P and the R, that's easy. Well, we could do that because we've gotten to the point that you're willing to tell me, yeah, I'm struggling with this and stuff like that. So I asked you the question. Now I got to persuade you to go get help. Either ideally, you let me go with you to get help. Second best and the distance second best is let me call them right now and you use my phone. You sit in my office. I'll step outside if you want and stuff like that. Third and very distant is promise me you won't kill yourself. And I don't say hurt yourself, do anything dumb. No, this is a promise me you will not kill yourself until we can get you help. That's a distant third, but if that's all they give you, that's all they give you. So I got to persuade you that. And then I got to have the referrals. What resources do we have in our community? I need them in my phone because I don't want to let's Google that and see no, I need to say, okay, here's who we can call. Here's here's a clinician that we know that we can reach 24/7. There's 988, which is now a national number, which will connect you with resources. A lot of communities have resources, and push comes to shove, if I've got nothing else, will you let me take you to the ER?
Mm.
You know, ER is not great because you're going to be there for a while because you're in with broken arms and everything else. But if that's the only place I can get you to be safe, um, if you've got guns at your house, can I come take the guns and put them at my house? All right, they're still yours. I'm not taking them away, but can I just take away that immediate reaction? Alcohol, central nervous system depressant. If you take an individual who's upset in crisis, combine it with alcohol and a firearm, that is just a terrible, terrible combination. So if I can eliminate one, two, or all three of those things, you know, so you know what? It's still your alcohol, it's still your whiskey, but I'm going to store it at my house for a couple of days and life calms down and you feel a little bit better. How about we do that? Hey, I'll just come over and hang out at your house type of thing. None of us would walk by somebody having a heart attack. None of us would walk by somebody who'd been in a serious motor vehicle crash. It's just not in our. This is no different. If I'm worried about somebody, how would I feel if I ignore it? And then I find out tomorrow that they took their own life. I mean, there's a lot of things I knew I could deal with in the patrol, and I did. That's one of them that if I didn't address it. Now, if I address it and you blow me off, you know, I can only do so much. I can't hog tie you and drag you to health, but I'm going to stay at it. I'm going to keep badgering you until I either get you help or something.
Yeah. And we know that cumulative stress and trauma, like quite literally rewires your brain. And so we're seeing a lot of this for like neurological reasons. And so you're exactly right. It's like, how can you keep at it? And then how can we get resources? Because there is healing.
Mhm.
You know, there are options for healing and for, you know, creating a better mental space for someone who is struggling. So it sounds to me, I mean, obviously you're doing great things in Ohio, and there are a lot of states that I think are kind of leading the charge when it comes to wellness. But there are still a lot of agencies out there and a lot of states out there that don't have wellness programming, or maybe don't know how or where to start or what to do. And so, if there's someone from another agency that maybe is in their infancy stages, or maybe doesn't really have anything, doesn't know what to do, or if leadership is listening, what is like maybe a really good tactical first step? Like, start here, do this, and then this. Like, what are the building blocks for creating that programming within an agency so that we can make sure that, you know, their personnel, sworn and civilian, because we
Right.
know it's important for the entire team to have resources, to have, you know, the resources that they need.
What do you need? Ask your people. Ask, you know, and one of the people. Don't ask the old guys like me because we're going to blow it off. Maybe not ask the middle guys because they're still thinking about promotion and stuff like. Ask the new people. You've been here for a while. What would you like to see us do in the area of mental, physical, emotional, financial? What is it that you need? What can we do as an agency to help you? Now, I understand, you know, most police departments, 70% of Ohio firefighters, this was an amazing number to me. 70% of Ohio firefighters are volunteers. They're not paid. They don't work on a paid department. You know, they get the call, they go screaming to the agency or the department, they jump on the truck and they go and they save their community. And then they go back to their normal job or go home. So some may not have the financial resources, but what does it take to sit down with your folks and, you know, one on one and say, "How you doing? How's it going?" You know, don't look at your watch, don't look at your phone, don't look at your computer. Actually, you know, how's things going? That was a really messed up call the other night. I heard that was rough. Are you doing okay? Is there anything that we can do for you? And it's that foundational thing. You know, maybe you can't designate people to be your wellness unit. Maybe, but you know what? I bet your neighboring community does. Somebody within your geographical drive has something. You know, borrow a therapy canine. If they've got peer support, ask them to come over when things go sideways. Don't, well, we handle our own. Well, yeah, but you don't hesitate to ask them for mutual aid. Ask them for this. Hey, heard you guys got a dog. At our next shift change, could you bring? No, everybody loves a therapy dog. I mean, even people that don't claim to love dogs will sit there and scratch their ears, and then, oh, people are noticing I can't do it anymore. Take advantage of the resources that are around you. The International Association of Firefighters Peer support and mental and physical wellness is a priority. The International Association of Chiefs of Police, it's a priority. Like you say, across the states, there's a number of state entities. And you know what? None of these people are going to hold back. So when I got pulled out of the academy to run the program here in Ohio, the post-critical incident seminars, I connected with a gentleman in South Carolina, the Reverend Dr. Eric Skidmore. And Dr. Skidmore is who kind of created the post-critical incident seminars back in 2020. And he's got that great Southern accent, but it was basically like, Stevie, what's your email? And is there a limit? I said, no, sir. He goes, you're going to get some things. And call me when you're done. So all of a sudden, he just buries my email. And then his comment was, change the logo. Put your logo in place of our logo. Change the word, whatever. It wasn't, this is ours, this is proprietary. No, it's none of these peer support. Nobody's going to call and say, I'm sorry, you're with the sheriff's office. We're not going to help you. No one's going to say that. So take advantage of those free resources that are out there. And that starts the conversation within your department. And then maybe you send a couple of firefighters, a couple of officers, a couple of dispatchers, a couple of your civilians to get trained. So when something goes sideways at your department, not if, when something goes sideways, we've got these resources. And then you can also pick up the phone and say, hey, Paige, we're kind of in over our head. We need some more help. And you're like, got it. I'm going to get some folks on your way. It's really just about helping each other out the same way we do on the street. It's just carrying that over into the mental and the physical health space to try to take care of each other's agency. Because you know what? I need you to be healthy. Because if I'm overwhelmed at my jurisdiction and you're coming to help me, I need you to be sharp and squared away. I want you on your A game when you roll in. I don't want to, I'm already dealing with things. I don't need to deal with your stuff also.
Yeah, and I love that advice. And it just goes back to what we talked about before about like talking about it, having a community. And I think that agencies maybe tend to kind of isolate themselves too. It's like people within agencies will isolate themselves if they're
Right.
struggling, and then agencies will kind of isolate themselves too. And to recognize that like you guys are a family, you're a community, and it's not just within your organization, it's across the entire United States. And there are resources and there are other agencies out there who have robust wellness programming that you can reach out to and ask them. And you're 100% correct. I couldn't imagine you calling, as leadership, a chief of police or a sheriff calling another agency who they know has an established wellness program and saying, hey, what are you guys doing? Like, we need to build it. I need your help. And them being like, no.
No,
I
it's
couldn't
let's
imagine that happening. Yeah.
it's let's meet for lunch. I'm going to bring you a bunch of copies of stuff, and we're going to talk about what we do. You talk
100%.
about the individualization, especially units, whether it's police or fire or whatever. Troll had a special response team, our version of SWAT, and I got sent to. They'd been involved in a shooting. Fortunately, no one was hit. But when I was walking up, one of the SWAT guys looked around and said, "Oh, we must be in trouble. Dad's here." And all those guys laughed. Now they all knew me. I'd been on the patrol a long time, but that guy on SWAT, he was a friend. And what he told the rest of the team is, he's okay. We're going to be okay. This guy's all right. And it breaks down those, yeah, you've got your own special. I was a motorcycle officer for 6.5 years. We thought we were the baddest guys that ever, rode motorcycles. But we're part of a bigger organization. And if something would have happened to our guys, the guys in the cars, they stepped right up. What can we do to help? The folks at the post. So we need to take that tactical assistance and we need to carry it over into the mental and the physical wellness. And again, get over. So your sheriff's office, your highway patrol, your the police department, your dispatch, your civilians. I was in Texas and a chief made a comment. I don't know why we let dispatchers come to these seminars. I've never seen a dispatcher's name on the wall. I said, Chief, 1968 called. They said, you're missing. He goes, huh? And I said, if you didn't catch it the first time, and my buddies that were with me just thought it was really funny that I'd blown him up.
Yeah.
But, my wife is a former dispatcher. She was on desk when a friend was hit and killed by a drunk driver. She was on desk for a couple of shootings, and then she was on desk for me a couple of times, and that wasn't easy.
It's a hard
Um,
job.
we've got to take care of the whole agency because how the whole agency goes is how we're going to get everybody to go home at night and be able to take care of their families and their friends. And again, be able to do this. No one stays like I did. When I talk about staying, 36 years and had all the stars in there, I was like, you gotta be kidding. Folks are like, one of the biggest things that broke my heart when I was in New York City, because I kept telling those folks I thought they were amazing. But if you ask a New York City police officer how long until retirement, he'll go 17 years, 3 months, 2 weeks, 7 days, and 5 hours.
But who's counting, right?
I didn't know, Paige, until the week I turned in my paperwork.
Mhm.
Honestly, I thought about it. Then I got offered the position. I went home and I talked to my wife about it. I filled out my paperwork, but it wasn't something. I didn't have a date. I wasn't plan, I knew I had to go at a certain date because of, drop and everything else. I knew there was a brick wall coming up, but I didn't have a date. And to me, to come to work every day, just saying, I just can't wait until I loved my job. I did. I enjoyed it. Whether I was a motor cop, whether I was at the academy, whether I was on the road as a regular officer, state house, I loved what I did. We got to get back to that. You'd asked me earlier in the conversation. I think this is huge. Your why. One
Mhm.
of the things we're asking first responders, and I asked during my trainings, is find your why. Something brought you here to begin with. You didn't do it because you thought you were going to get rich. You didn't do it because you thought you were going to get parades and pats on the back. Something made you not only apply, but to put up with the academy, to put up with your first couple of years on the road. Something brought you to this. Occasionally, you got to sit down and say, what was that again? And I got to get back to it because
I
it's just so
agree.
easy to forget what brought me into this.
I agree that the why is so important. And I actually had a chief on this podcast say that one of his pieces of advice was to earlier, anyone who's earlier in the career, but you could really do it anytime, is write that down. Like, what is
Great
your
idea.
why? And then put it somewhere. So it's like you have that piece of paper where you write down like why you're doing this and then refer back to that in the hard times because that brings you back to that passion and that's what's going to keep you going. If you can refer back to like this is why I do this when you're struggling, then that can help you to get through those hard times. So I absolutely agree that the why is so crucial. I also thinking having a wellness why creates
Mhm.
that longevity. Like why is it important for me to be physically and mentally well and physically and mentally fit? And obviously that answer is going to vary person to person. It might be the job or retirement or family. But the ultimate goal is to create that longevity in your career and then have longevity in retirement, which
Very
brings me
much.
to kind of that last topic. I know we're running close to the end here, but retirement. It's a challenging transition for a lot of people.
Much
How can individuals prepare themselves for retirement? And how can
plan
organizations support retirement and that transition into retirement?
and help them plan. It is
Yeah.
not all about money. Money's important. Don't get me wrong. You got to be financially prepared to, because you're not going to be making the money you used to and everything else. That's very important. But when they take that uniform, when they take that badge, when you can't just go through the back door anymore. And just real quick, so I was teaching right after I retired with the post commander at Mansfield. Mansfield, a city just north of Columbus up here. It's where they filmed Shawshank Redemption. That was the prison that we were actually going to go present in. And I come to the post, well, I can't come in the back door anymore because they turned off my swipe card. So I have to come in the front door like a civilian. And there's a camera and a mirror glass, and I hear this disconnected voice ask, can I help you? And I said, yeah, and I didn't know how to introduce myself
Mm.
because I wasn't former Lieutenant Click because I was still Steve Click, but I wasn't Lieutenant anymore. I spit out my name. She goes, oh, Lieutenant, hits the buzzer, lets me in. That was over 7 years ago. Nobody remembers. Nobody remembers Steve Click now, especially a dispatcher in the field. We got to be prepared for that. And don't tell me you're going to go play golf 24/7 or fish 20. Nobody's going to do that. It is going to be a transition when you move from officer, captain, whatever, to Mr. And it is a bit of an adjustment. Even though I knew where I was going, I knew who my boss was going to be, I knew what my desk was going to look like. I basically continued what I was doing on the patrol, but now I did it for another state agency. Even though I had that very smooth transition, it was different. I saw a traffic crash happen in my city, and I waited. It was a pretty good crash, and I waited till the officers got there, and I started to tell this young officer what happened. He goes, "Yeah, yeah, we got it." I'm thinking, son, I've used more ink than you've used gasoline. But you know what? He didn't know. I'm just,
Yeah.
and I don't have that lieutenant rank anymore. These guys that can, continue to try to No, I'm Steve Click now. I'm not those things. So I think that we need to help our retirees because just because you walked out the door, you didn't suddenly get amnesia. All that stuff is still there. That fatal traffic crash I told you 11 days out of the training academy, I can still picture it. I can still picture the car. I can still picture the parents' reaction. I can still picture all that. And that was 1985. And we've got to start normalizing this the day they walk in the academy. We
Mhm.
can't wait until they get out there and the bad thing happens. We're like, oh, hey, the bad things happen. They've got to know that when a bad thing happens, whatever that is, and it's up to the individual, that there's likely to have peer support come up and what they're going to do and what they're not going to do. We've got to have that from the very beginning. So it's normal. Nobody's like, oh man, does anybody see me talking to peer? No. Yeah, peer support's here. Of course they are. Why wouldn't they be here? The
Yeah.
shoot team's going to be here. The boss is going to be here. And so is peer support. And it's all normalized. And, one of the things we've done here in Ohio is we've looked at basic training. And I was very fortunate to be part of that work group that did that. Well, we talked about scenario based training. Start it with the call, the response, deal with the call, write it up. How would you testify in court? But we included peer support because, for first responders now, many agencies have said this is a part of our fundamental response. So we
Love
want
that.
officers to see it and not think, oh my gosh, am I broke? Am I something wrong with me? Because no, you just like going to see the lawyer, you're going to go see our shrink, especially if you've been in a shooting. That's to protect the agency. Let's go talk to somebody to protect you. So I think starting it, but then carrying it over as much as an agency can. I know that resources become an issue. Sometimes retirees don't want it. Sometimes we scatter to the four winds. All of us from the northern part of the country all flee to the southern part of the country because we're done with snowflakes. Um, so sometimes it's difficult for an agency to continue to support me if I'm not local, if I don't live here. But a lot of agencies are also looking at retirees associations, retirees luncheons. The Highway Patrol every year sponsors a lunch and they invite all the retirees and their spouses to come to the training academy. It's a free lunch. It's
I love
served by
that.
the cadets. They give an overview. Hey guys, this is what's happening in the organization. They get a chance to walk through the building, look at their old pictures, show it to their family. That was me back when I was 20 because we understand that is every highway patrol function, retirements, promotions, whatever. They ask the retirees to stand up because they acknowledge we wouldn't be here without the group that came before. You wouldn't have this job if not for them. So we're going to acknowledge our military. We're going to acknowledge our retirees. Please stand up and be acknowledged. And it's huge. I love doing it. It's not a matter of ego. It's a matter of thank you. Thank you for acknowledging the fact that I did my time. I stayed it out. I stuck it out. So I think that normalizing all of this is what's key.
I don't know why that like made me feel emotional, but I love that. I love that you guys do that. And I think that's so important to make people who, did retire and they did their time feel like they're still valued and they're still a part of the community and that they had a purpose and that they're respected. And I think that that's so cool that you guys do that. And I agree with you. I think throughout our whole conversation, really, we covered everything from like start early,
Mhm.
start in the academy, normalize these things, carry those resources into the agency for all employees, sworn and civilian, normalize it, talk about it, have leadership support these programs and participate in these programs. So again, it's normal and it's a safe space to seek resources if and when you need it. And then to try to have resources into retirement for those who do retire to feel like they still are valued and respected and supported throughout their community. So I
And it's
have,
important that we take advantage of resources such as you. I mean,
thank
there's
you.
there's people out there that care about first responders. It's not about they don't want to tell us how to do our job. They don't want to tell us where we were wrong and why everything was our fault or anything else like that. They really want to support that. And I encourage people, do something other than watching, car crashes on, I won't name the website, but do something other than watch stupid videos. if you can take a couple of minutes sitting in the front seat of your car and you can pull up something and you can get something out of it. And it just took you a couple of seconds to, wow, and again, I was just reminded here recently, and not to blow smoke, but just reminded you're grounding.
Mhm.
5 things you see. It just goes
Yeah.
right down the list. One of our clinicians at the Post Critical Incident seminars, Mary, does that as we're getting ready each day to break it up. She goes through a grounding, what do you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you taste? And it brings you right back here. Not 2 hours ago or 6 weeks ago. It's not what's going to happen in the future. Where am I right here? So taking advantage of, and that was just a quick tip that you happen to put on there. It just, oh, okay. And it's stuff I knew, but it was a great reminder.
Thank you.
Box breathing, whatever it is, take advantage of those things. Don't, yeah, the other stuff's entertaining, but it's not helping you, I
Yeah.
guess. And I'm encouraged to see the number of agencies that are working with you because they're making the investment in their personnel because they realize way more than the cars, way more than the toys, the most valuable resource is their people. And by doing what they're doing with you, they're saying, okay, we're recognizing our people are our most valuable and our hardest resource to replace. Because Dodge is building new cars and Ford's building new cars, and we can get new cars and trucks left and right, and we can get a new building. But we can't get our people that are willing to come out and do this job for their communities.
100%. Yeah, 100%. I have one final question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
Words of wisdom for anyone who's earlier in their career when it comes to wellness. What is one thing that you wish that you would have done or that you wish you would have known that would have helped you with your wellness that you could now share with others who are newer in this career?
Talk to someone, whether it's your spouse, whether it's a chaplain, whether it's a clinician, whether it's a coworker, have that person that, and I had Bill. Bill had been my coach, so you have I was fortunate in that my coach and I got along really well. I had a great relationship with him, but have that person, and the last 20 plus years, I've had my spouse. So when I had those rough days, she got it. Have that person that you can talk to because I can't guarantee that they can fix it. Again, can't guarantee if you don't talk about it, it will not get better and it will almost always get worse. So whether it is, again, whether it's a clinician, whether it's a chaplain, I got to get it out. I got to talk about it. It has to be, to that person. I don't want to get too graphic. I don't need to get, gory and everything else like that. But if I'm struggling, and you know what? I got to have the courage, and that's all it is. I got to have the courage to, man, that was hard. That was messed up. Maybe I cried. Maybe I was sad. Maybe it bothered me for a couple of days. Okay, I'm a person. Some of the things that we see should bother me. If it doesn't bother me, that should be a problem. And I guess the last thing, Paige, is listen to your family. If they say you've changed, you have. So listen to them and say, okay, what's changed and how can I fix it? Not only what got me into this, how can I get back to the person you fell in love with? How can I get back to that person that you were proud of and you bragged about me? How can I get back there? Whether it's again going to see a clinician, going to see check. What can I do to get me back to being that person that I was at the beginning?
Thank you.
Thank you,
Great
ma'am. I
words of
appreciate you.
advice. I appreciate your time so much. Thank you for sharing your expertise and your insights. I really, really appreciate it. And
Absolutely.
happy First Responder Wellness Week. This is a great episode. Thank you.
You too, ma'am. And thank you for everything that you're doing for the first responder community and the posts that you're putting out that are so positive and just really helpful and beneficial to people.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am.